Welcome to the Deep Dive,
Emerald City Hockey's Seattle Kraken podcast.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Deep Dive, Emerald City Hockey Seattle Kraken podcast. RJ, another week of Kraken hockey goes by. Only 2 games this time, so not like too much to break down and discuss there. But it does feel like we almost kind of have to have a repeat of last week's podcast based on the 2 games that we have gotten this past week, which is basically just around the idea of how sustainable is this for the Kraken as they pick up another couple points off of 2 OTLs. There's been a lot of discussion around maybe not so much the systems directly, but certainly the result of the systems, i.e. how few shots the Kraken are taking as they set a new franchise record the other night. I know you're very excited to talk about that, so I'll save anything else for you. But interesting times we live in.
For sure. I mean, a new franchise record, maybe not one that you want to set. I wouldn't say I'm excited about it. I guess I'm excited always to see something kind of historic for the team, but not an exciting excited to discuss it, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, that really is the big conversation today. Just, is this sustainable given the last couple data points that we've had with these couple games? I think there's some interesting stuff to talk about that maybe we hadn't seen the week prior. So looking forward to kind of doing the deep dive into all that.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the lineup. We're going to talk about something interesting you found over at the NHL Edge website. So I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that because we haven't had a lot of time to discuss it. You found it last night, so I'm curious. But of course, first we got to thank our wonderful sponsor, the law offices of Rico Tessendor, for sponsoring this podcast. As always, RJ. Now, I am wearing my Geeky Jerseys Godzilla 70th anniversary jersey here, RJ. Do you know why?
Well, you said it had something to do with talking about Rico, but you didn't say anything beyond that. And so I've been trying to put the dots together here. I can't figure it out. I don't have a good guess here.
It is
Halloween?
No, that's a good guess. It is, of course, November 3rd today. And that was the day in 1954 that Godzilla premiered in Japan. It is the 71st anniversary of Godzilla. Wearing this for Godzilla Day, of course. RJ, come on, how do you not know these things? And it got me thinking, though. You know, we talked about this I don't know, early last season, I think it was, with Jurassic Park, right? And the concept of what a great universe to be a personal injury attorney in Jurassic Park, because it just seems ready for it, right? And I was thinking, I was like, well, Godzilla kind of matches up with that, but there's one key difference here. Godzilla steps on your car, right? His tail takes out part of your house. Who do you sue? Who's liable for that, right? Jurassic Park made a lot of sense. There's InGen, there's a company that is directly responsible. There's somebody for Rico to go after. I mean, does Rico just go after Godzilla?
I mean, what does Godzilla have? I mean, how can Godzilla really pay you? I don't know. But here's the thing, though. This is where you really want Rico. I'm sure he could figure out. This is the question for Rico, not for us. Like he'll figure that out.
Yes.
But also, after Godzilla goes and wrecks all this stuff, it's going to be even more of a nightmare than usual to deal with the insurance companies.
Yes, it will.
Because they're going to be pretty busy and they're going to want to deny whatever they possibly can. They're going to be in the red. Rico can deal with the insurance companies for you. And that's one of the big things. We always talk about the settlements, all that stuff. But Rico will deal with the insurance companies while you get better. And so that's a huge thing, especially in the aftermath of Godzilla.
Yes. I mean, was it insurance companies have the clause for acts of God? Do they have an acts of Godzilla clause in there? Just they should. You never know. That either that or we find some way to make Rico giant and he goes mano a mano against Godzilla. That'd be cool too.
There we go.
Let us know which you'd prefer, Rico. Would you rather continue to deal with insurance companies or you want to be giant and fight Godzilla?
I think you cut him off right there. Would you rather continue to deal with insurance companies or whatever the other thing is?
Yep, that's the one. While we hope none of you ever need his services, the odds say at some point someone out there will be involved in an accident, whether on the road, at work, or anywhere. Godzilla might find you. When you are, we hope you call Rico at 425-778-9800 or visit his website, ricotessendor.com, to schedule a free consultation. He's won millions of dollars for his clients and helped thousands of people in the greater Seattle area. And as a fellow member of the ECH community, we know he'll help you too. All right, real quick before we get going, just a couple quick announcements. First one being that live game, post-game live is tonight. There's no game on the Tuesday. Normally that would be on Wednesday, but for RJ travel reasons, it is going to be happening tonight after the game against the Blackhawks. So want to let everybody know that, and then I'll pass it over to you, RJ, to talk about our upcoming Patreon schedule.
Yeah, that's right. So we do have our live game commentary scheduled for Patreon this month. It'll be Tuesday, November 18th for the game against the Detroit Red Wings. That's a 4 p.m. start to kick off that 4-game road trip for the Kraken. So everybody just put that in your calendar. We'll be watching that game along together. And then, speaking of that road trip, a little bit later in that road trip, I've got some very exciting news to announce, but we have some watch parties on the schedule. So super excited to announce those. They'll be at Queen Anne Beer Hall, and I even have graphics made. Let's go for the YouTube version.
Yep.
So our first watch party of the season is going to be Sunday, November 23rd. It's a 2 p.m. start for the Kraken's game against the New York Islanders. So that's going to be really fun. And Sunday, it'll be good to be on the weekend. And yeah, 2 p.m. start. It'll be feel a little different. Sun's still be out. But everyone come join us at Queen Anne Beer Hall. Address is 203 West Thomas Street in Seattle. It's right by Climate Pledge Arena. And then we have another watch party also on the schedule, also at Queen Anne Beer Hall. And it is shortly after that. It's Thursday, December 4th for the Kraken's game against the Edmonton Oilers. That one is a 6 p.m. start. Get to see the Kraken face off against Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, see if they can shut them down again. I mean, they won their last game against Edmonton, so that should be a fun rematch there. So those are our two watch parties on the schedule. Can't wait to see you at those. I mean, that's some of my favorite things to do with ECH, is get to talk to everybody, hang out, watch a game together, and put some faces to names.
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to it. We weren't able to get as many watch parties in last year as we wanted to, so excited that we're getting started early. Already have a couple on the books. We've been talking with the Beer Hall about more. Ideally, we'll find a way to maybe do this once a month. That's kind of what everybody's shooting for. So really looking forward to being able to spend time watching Kraken hockey with everybody.
Yeah, and they're on board too. There will be more watch parties in 2026. But those are just the two through the end of the year, and then we'll keep you posted on future ones too.
Yep, definitely. All right, on to the Kraken themselves, RJ. Let's talk about injuries, kind of what we always have to start the podcast with. Unfortunately, this season, injuries have always been prevalent. What is the latest on the injured Kraken?
Yeah, well, it's actually been some good news on the injured Kraken. I'll knock on wood here. No new injuries in the last week, so that's really nice. And then as far as recoveries, we do have some players coming back. And the most notable one is Kaapo Kakko, who came back for his first game of the season against the New York Rangers. So he is all good to go. He played that first game. Said the body was, feeling maybe not fully, got a little tired during the game, but he said that's to be expected, of course. But good to see Kaapo Kakko back. Then Ryker Evans, he is progressing. He's been in a red no contact jersey, but he has been practicing with the team. So that's a good sign. He's still not ready to shed that no contact jersey, but he's been practicing. And as Coach Lambert did clarify yesterday, he is progressing despite, because it looked like he might have been out of the red no contact jersey. He was in a regular jersey for practice yesterday, but it was an optional practice, so it didn't really matter because there's no contact anyway in optional practice. So he's still in red jersey territory. Then some less good news. Freddie Gaudreau, they don't really expect him to be back soon, but he's still recovering. And then Jared McCann, the team hasn't, there's no real set timeline for his return. We were maybe hoping to get one by now, but it sounds like the team is kind of in a holding pattern with him, still trying to figure some things out. NHL teams aren't really all that specific with injury stuff, especially when the injury is, it doesn't seem like a straightforward recovery here. Otherwise, we would have gotten a clear timeline. So we'll see what the latest on Jared McCann is, but we have not seen him on the ice, and so I wouldn't expect him back soon.
Yeah, and did they put him on retroactive IR this week, or was that last week?
That was last
That was
week. Yeah,
last
they
week.
put him
Yeah.
on IR retroactive, and that's just for the roster spot. The
Yeah.
IR thing doesn't tell us a whole lot aside from just that he was out for a week. So
Yep. Yeah, we'll see what's happening there. But we did get Capo Caco back, RJ, and I thought he looked all right. I thought he looked a lot like Capo Caco out there, and what he was doing, kind of where he was. You could tell though that it was his first game in the system and in regular season NHL action, right? There was a couple times where it felt like he was maybe a step late to where he's like supposed to be in the system and stuff, particularly in the offensive zone. He's always been a great kind of instinctual defender, so I didn't notice it too much there. But I thought that he played pretty well. It's just going to be a matter of, does he stay on that kind of leftovers line? Are they able to build some chemistry? Because I think more notable than, like, say, Capo Caco returning was just that line of Shane Wright, Capo Caco, and Mason Marchment looked like they had zero chemistry with one another, and they looked pretty ineffective against the New York Rangers. And so it's going to be a matter of, does Capo Caco stay there? Are they able to build some chemistry? Or is this just a leftovers line and we're going to continue to see a rotation there? And if we do, how much of that is going to affect Shane Wright, who hasn't really made any noise in a little bit here for the Kraken? 6 points through their 11 games. I don't know. What's kind of your thoughts on that third line situation for the Kraken right now?
yeah, well, as far as Kako, I think just being a half step behind is to be expected in the
Yep.
first game back from injury. But you're right, he was doing a lot of the things that we know him to do. And I think that maybe highlights kind of the lack of chemistry and the lack of fit on this line, because you have a lot of guys that maybe want to go down low. You've got Mason Marchman, also another big body there. And it just, the three of them didn't seem to work very well together. And I think it's not the only line
Mhm.
that hasn't been working the best for the Kraken recently. I know you turned to me during the last game and just said, "Man, the Matty Beniers line has kind of lost all its mojo or its juice recently," and I agree with that. And so I think now might be a good time for a bit of a line shakeup. Doesn't sound like they're going to do that for tonight's game against Chicago. It seems like they're going to go with the same lines they did last game. But I do think they're starting to get a little stale, and particularly the Shane Wright line, where for the last, whether it's Capo Caco being thrown on there, or even before that, feels like it's kind of been a leftovers line for
Mhm.
at least a week there, where you keep the Matty Beniers line together, of course, because that trio was doing well. You keep Stevenson with the guys you want him with, and then whoever's left just gets put with Matty Beniers. And so I think it might be near time, certainly if things don't work out well against Chicago tonight, for a bit of a line shakeup.
I'm right there with you. And honestly, we've been seeing it in game, right? Like the lines that have started the game very rarely have been the lines that finish the game, with Lane Lambert here for the last about week and a half. And it's one of those things where I think sometimes from the outside we can talk about, you know, line, first, second, third line, like in name a lot, or where a player is. I mean, this is certainly something that goes back like a couple weeks. I was having a lot of discussions with people on Discord about it, about like when Yanni Newman was on the third line, but he saw the same amount of ice time and was effectively on the fourth line. He was there for like two shifts and then he was back on the fourth line. And I think that what we're seeing with Lane Lambert is he's not afraid to shake things up. He will promote guys mid game who are playing well. He will demote guys mid game that are not playing so well on any given night, right? Like this isn't like a long term thing. He's just going with who's looking good. He wants them to have ice time. If they're, in the groove, he wants them to stay there and build off of that with some momentum. I think that's a perfectly normal thing for a coach to do, but I do think it muddies the waters as far as when we talk about players being a first, second, or third line player or a fourth line player. It's fluid. There is no kind of set placement for guys. I think you got to look at their situational usage and you got to look at their ice time to kind of get an idea of, vaguely what they actually are in this lineup, and kind of what you can then label them. But I don't know that you can always just look at what line they're on and then say, oh, so and so is a third liner now. His usage might still be 7 minutes a night, right? In Yanni Newman's case. So I think that that's going to be something to talk about with the lineups. But yeah, I think the lineup probably needs to get shaken up for the start of a game instead of just after a poor first period, which is what we've seen out of the last two games. And I mean, I don't know, like, kind of where to go with that. I mean, obviously, the Matty Beniers line was deemed untouchable, but that was also kind of back when Jared McCann was there. And then, Berkeley Catton came in. He had some good early momentum. I feel like he's kind of leveled off and kind of fallen into the same rut that Matty Beniers and Jordan Eberle have at this point, where they're going out there, but it almost feels like everybody's just going through the system motions rather than really making plays happen. They're getting up ice quick, but then things fizzle out once they get the zone entry. So I don't think that that line should be untouchable. I know you're really the lineup guy though, RJ. So I kind of want to hear what you have as an idea for where guys should slot in.
Yeah, I do have a few changes I would like to see, and I do want to say on the Matty Beniers line that the last couple games, I feel like it's been Matty Beniers going out there trying to create something, and I love seeing that from
Yeah.
him because I think he's absolutely giving the effort, giving the energy. I don't want to just take that whole line and be like, yeah, they're not clicking, but Matty's doing his job. Like he's doing really well, and that's why I want to switch the wingers around him, ideally. So here's kind of what I had in mind and I might like to see at least until Jared McCann is healthy, because I think once McCann comes back, you put him back with Beniers and
Yep.
Eberle and just put that line together because it's been fantastic. But in the meantime, if I was adjusting things a little bit here, I would go Schwartz, Beniers, Kako.
Hmm.
I'd give Matty a couple new wingers and kind of put that line back together from
Yeah.
last season and see what you have there. But I think those two guys will kind of help Matty generate things a little bit more. Then I'd focus on Shane Wright because I want to see him play a little better. I want to see him play with guys who have a little bit more chemistry. We haven't really seen Berkeley Catton and Shane Wright together for an extended stretch of time
Hmm.
this season, but I want to see what that looks like, especially maybe in that San Jose game
Yeah.
where it's not a very good opponent, especially defensively, and they could have some creativity to go out there and do some things. So I would go Catton, Wright, and Eberle.
Hmm.
Just give them a veteran on that line because you do have a couple of young guys there.
He's shown
And
good
then that,
chemistry with Ebbs in the past too, Shane Wright.
yeah, he has. So I like the way those two work together. And I think that would be a good line I'd like to see. And then that leaves Marchment, Stevenson, Tolvanen. Not great results for the three of them. I mean, like looking at the lines and some of their numbers this season, like no line with Stevenson on it has been all that great. I guess Marchment, Stevenson, Winterton. So you could do that instead, bump Tolvanen down. But that's kind of the leftovers line there. But I don't mind it being leftovers because we're focused on Matty Beniers and Shane Wright here. I think
Yeah.
that's where the focus should be. And then, Karche, Myers, Winterton, don't mess with that fourth line. They're doing great.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they've been the most consistent and, best performing line. Maybe not at putting the puck in the back of the net, but certainly at like kind of 5-on-5, getting puck possession, getting plays out of the defensive zone, staying in the offensive zone. Because that's really, I feel like the big struggle with the Kraken right now, RJ, is staying in the offensive zone and being able to then generate chances there. That is a big issue that they're dealing with at the moment. And of course, that's going to fall into the sustainability talk that we're going to do in a little bit. But it really does feel like that fourth line is the only one able to do that for any amount of time at the moment.
Right. And that's a key, I think, certainly in the game against the Rangers, the last one that we saw, where the Kraken kept getting into this cycle of defend, get tired, dump it out, change, defend, get tired, repeat. And I had some questions from fans asking just why is this the Kraken are getting caved in for the last half hour. They don't have a shot attempt for 15 minutes. Why is this happening? And I think that's a big reason why is that you get into that cycle of just having to defend. And what you need to break out of that, and what we usually see the fourth line bring, is a shift where they just get the puck deep in the other team zone and just cycle it around. And yeah, maybe they don't get a puck to the net, but they just make sure that nothing happens and you're not defending for a shift, and allows everybody to rest up. And then you can go back and get out of that cycle and maybe try and generate some offense.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll see what they're able to do there. But yeah, I think that, these kinds of a shake up to the lineup is probably in order. And I don't know. It feels like the team kind of knows that too, given that we're seeing it mid game kind of so frequently. So I think it's just a matter of time before we maybe see it. Just take place before the game gets going there. Now let's talk about the thing that you noticed. We can kind of transition over there because this might help explain why Shane Wright, his numbers aren't great right now, or it seems like he's lost some momentum in the point production column. and potentially Matty Beniers too, as Matty Beniers also, I believe, has 6 points through the 11 games. And I think that this, what we're going to talk about here, applies to him as well.
Yeah, so I found something interesting here on NHL Edge, which, by the way, would recommend any fan just take a look at it from time to time. There's a lot of interesting data on there. It's from the NHL's player and puck tracking. And so you get fun things like shot speed, skating distance, shot location. There's a lot of cool data that you can just go through. And the NHL, I think, does a pretty good job of making it, accessible enough where you can understand it pretty
Yeah.
clearly and the way that it's presented. Fun stat, by the way, before we get into the skating thing, I just thought this was fun. Brandon Montour's goal in the Rangers game, I don't know if you saw this. It was the fastest shot this season to go in, fastest shot on a goal. So I thought that was kind of fun. It was over 96 miles per hour. So fun things like that.
Yeah, I like that they're starting to incorporate the Edge stuff into the mobile app, right? If you just go into the mobile app for the NHL and you go over to stats, it will give you like that day's stats, like which team had the highest, skating speed on average, which player had the highest skating speed per average, what was the hardest shot of the day. It will have some of the leader stuff, like Brandon Montour is currently on there on the stats page as having the fastest shot to go in. I think that that's really cool, and I'm kind of liking that that exists now on the NHL app, because we don't give the NHL flowers that often, mostly because they generally don't earn them. But I do feel like on this one issue, they've really earned them. The Edge site has been great these last couple years, and then starting to incorporate that more and more just into your regular stats stuff, including on the mobile app, I think is really big. I also love that at the end of the day, they show you they have just a rink, and it shows where all the goals that day have been scored. And so you could just kind of get an idea as you check that at like the end of every day. Okay, these are the areas in the NHL where scoring tends to happen. Maybe that's what I should be yelling at my team about.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
you're
And
a fan.
especially for yeah, well, especially for newer fans too, because I know on this podcast we talk a lot about, well, the Kraken are going to the areas that they need
Yeah.
to go to score goals, or they're not going to the areas, right? We don't. We'll sometimes say where those areas are, but we don't say it every time. And especially for
Yes.
newer fans, I think it helps to be able to visualize exactly where that is on the ice as you're watching games and look out for that sort of thing.
Hey everybody, it's future Dylan and RJ here. While we were editing, we did realize something about the conversation you're about to hear on the podcast in just a second. We're going to be looking at the distance skated for players per 60, but we realized that the chart that we were looking at was just based off of one evening, the game against the Rangers, not based on the full season.
Yeah, we realized that pretty soon after looking at it, even like while we were recording, but I didn't want to kind of mess with the flow of everything. But the main concept does stand. And by the way, the team stats that I'm about to cite here, those are all correct. The Kraken are number one in for their forwards and like distance skated everything, tied for second. Like the team stats are all correct, but as far as the numbers on the individual players, that's just the Kraken Rangers game. Concept generally still stands though. Like Matty Beniers, number 6 in the NHL. I mean, it'll all make sense of what we're talking about. But
Yeah.
like the numbers are roughly there, but it's not as insane on a player by player basis as we're about to say.
Yeah, not as drastic as we're going to make it appear in the next little bit, but we didn't want to cut it out and kind of chop up the whole conversation, because the message is still very much the message, and it definitely holds. But we'll get back to past Dylan and RJ now, but just wanted to clarify that for everybody.
So I want to get to the stat that I found though, because I thought this was interesting. I was looking at player numbers and just league leaders, and I went over to skating distance, and I sorted by, so there's total miles skated, all this stuff, average per 60. So miles skated per 60 minutes on the ice. And I just sorted by top in the league. And here's the list that I found. So if you're watching this on YouTube, I just put it up here, the list of all the players. But of course, if you're just listening audio only, I'll tell you top in the NHL with 11.94 miles skated per 60 minutes of ice time, Berkeley Catton. Number 2 with 11.36, Matty Beniers. Number 3 with 11.33, Shane Wright. And no, I'm not just looking at Kraken players. This is not a Kraken sorted list. Number 4, Juuso Parssinen of the New York Rangers, who we actually saw the other day. Number 5, Eeli Tolvanen. Number 6, Sam Carrick of the Rangers. Number 7, Ryan Winterton. And also tied for ninth, Jaden Schwartz. And going all the way down, there's a lot of Kraken very high on this list. And I thought that was really interesting. And I think it can tell us some interesting things about the way that they're playing and what this Lane Lambert system demands of its players.
Right. I mean, we've done a lot of talking about the system and, particularly for the centers, what it involves as far as them playing deep in their own zone, in the defensive zone and defending there, being the primary, F1 defender below the goal line. I mean, I talked about this last week with the graphics that I made, kind of diagramming the system and how they play in the defensive zone and then also how they play in the offensive zone. But if you are the F1 in this system, you're being asked to play below the goal line at both ends of the ice. You're literally 199 feet probably is the range that you're being expected to cover on the sheet of ice, right? Of the 200 feet, you're being asked to cover about 199 of that. And that is, it's a little unusual. It's not like out there, but it is a lot. And I think that what this the stat that you have found is showcasing is that, you obviously see Matty Beniers and Shane Wright there. You see some of the other kind of more defensively minded wingers, right? Or defensively and forecheck minded wingers. And I think that this is just another good example of this is what the Kraken system is asking these guys to go out there and do. And again, credit to all of these guys. They're skating miles, right? They are literally going out there and skating miles and miles and miles, and the effort hasn't waned, and they're still performing and they're finding ways of getting it done despite what I assume is pretty tiring work.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a lot of work playing in that system, and but I think it also might explain things too, like when we see players like maybe a Shane Wright with less ice time than we might expect, or I mean, that's something that we've seen kind of consistently with the Kraken for a while. Is that, and I think Dan Biles, a different system, but Dan Bilesma talked about it like with Jared McCann, and I asked him kind of why he plays less than other players of that caliber in the NHL, and he said it's not a minute isn't just a minute no matter how you play it. There are certain things you do in that minute, and if you play less, you can get more out of those minutes. And I think this might be an example of that.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think that that could be the case here with Shane Wright. I mean, that being said, Matty Beniers finds a way, according to Hockey Reference, to play 1960 a night. Not sure why it's not just 20 minutes there. So I don't know. It's one of those things where I think they could probably still find a couple minutes somewhere to give to Shane Wright if they could, or if they get the line right, right? Part of it is where going back to what we've already talked about, where it's kind of a leftovers line, and I think that's affecting things. But I think that it shows that, Shane Wright, Matty Beniers, they are going out there, they are true two-way centermen. They are skating up and down the ice. They are taking care of business at both ends, and this is just another way of quantifying that, right? And I think that that's important. So, but there is a notable center name missing, and I think this is partly what you're getting at with this kind of latest point that you brought up, and that is, of course, Chandler Stevenson. And going back to when I was diagramming the systems last week, I did mention that, certainly defensively, the F1 is almost exclusively the center for the Kraken, with one notable exception, and that, of course, was Chandler Stevenson, where we would see guys like Jaden Schwartz, Ellie Tolvanen, or Ryan Winterton, depending on when they're on his line, take over that job. And sure enough, RJ, who are the other Kraken on this list here? But Ellie Tolvanen, Ryan Winterton, and Jaden Schwartz. So kind of does play itself out. But this could go to the point that you're trying to make, and sorry to steal it here. This could be partly why we're seeing so much Chandler Stevenson in just the raw minute total, is because he isn't having to do as much as, say, Matty Beniers and Shane Wright. He's able to kind of get out there or stay out there for longer shifts because of that.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that, again, not all minutes are equal here in terms of what you're doing. And I think it speaks to the different things the Kraken are asking Chandler Stevenson to do or not do in those minutes. And so this is one of those data points that I think kind of helps put a piece of that puzzle together. When you're looking at raw ice time, it really doesn't tell the whole story. And I know that's something that even, I've been cautioned against when I'm like, well, Shane Wright only got this much ice time or whatever. Not all minutes are equal here, and I think we're seeing that in just the skating distance. I think this is a stat that just can be very telling as far as what the players are actually doing or not doing. Also, I think it says something about maybe Stevenson's fit or lack thereof for the Lane Lambert system.
Yeah. So, but that's, oh, I mean, that's a whole other can of worms to get into. But yeah, I think this is an interesting thing, and I think it does, it does stay a lot about the style of game that the Kraken are playing. And when we're talking about the players giving effort and the players having effort in the games, it is taking legitimate effort because they are being asked to do something that really players around the league are just not being asked to do. And again, credit to the guys. They're finding ways of doing it, but how long are they going to be able to do that, right? Like, yeah, I think that that becomes like a legitimate question, is how long are they going to be able to keep this pace up, right? Where you have guys going out there and skating over a mile a period, right? I think is one of the things. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting kind of question here that it raises.
Yeah, and I did pull up the team stats, by the way, too, because we do have numbers just for the entire team. And the Kraken, for all skaters, are tied for second in the league in miles skated. But you look at the forwards, especially number one in the NHL with an average of 9.9 miles skated per 60 minutes. So, even from a full team perspective, number two is the Colorado Avalanche, by the way, with 9.89. So right behind them, but it is still a pretty big drop off after that for some of the other teams. But it's interesting. You got Colorado 2, Florida 3, some of the top teams in the league there as
Yeah.
far as how much they're skating. But, can you keep that up over the course of a whole season? It's a lot to do.
Right. And you think about, some of the players in those systems too, and you're talking about two of the best at the center position, and like, Sasha Barkov, Nathan MacKinnon. Obviously Barkov has not played this year for Florida, but they're keeping the systems together, right? From when he would play. You got guys like Sam Bennett there still, and Lundell. So it is interesting. It's, again, I like the system that the Kraken are playing. I think that it's a great system for the roster that they have, right? I think Lane Lambert has done a great job of finding a way to take a roster that is in, realistically on paper, the bottom third of the league, and get the most out of it. And that's what coach for this team needed to do. That's what we were kind of talking about as they were undergoing yet another coaching search, was who can find a way of kind of making this work. And I think Lane Lambert has found a way to make it work. And I think he did a good job of recognizing that, hey, the two young centermen that this team has, right? They're centers of the future. Matty Beniers, Shane Wright. Well, I mean, what's basically the number one thing talked about them going all the way back to their draft years? It's the fact that they're two-way guys, right? They like to play defense. They're good at playing defense. All right, let me kind of craft a system around that, and let's try to put these guys in the best spot possible for them. And I think that we are seeing that, though would like a little bit more production on the point side of things.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to look at too, just how Lane Lambert manages rest versus practice and such, given that November's pretty busy. October, they had some days off and some stretches, and it's okay. But November is going to be a really busy month. 14 games in 30 days of November. It's a lot. And so we'll see how he kind of manages the team's fatigue there.
Yeah, with another road trip in there too, like another East Coast road trip. So it's going to be an interesting one for sure. Wouldn't be surprised to see lots of optional practice days, probably.
Yeah, I'd say so.
If we had to guess. But let's talk about how the Kraken are playing as a whole here, RJ, because it feels like the theme of this season is really just going to boil down to how sustainable is this? How sustainable is the Kraken's current success here, RJ, as they're already up to 4 OTLs on the season? That is, I mean, gosh, it feels like that's more than they had all of last year. They did have 6 last year. It is not more than they had, but certainly they're on pace to smash through that mark, RJ. But they're finding ways to continue to pick up points in games that, frankly, they don't look like they should really be in. And I think that that was the theme of the 2 games that they played this week, both the first one against Montreal and then the last one against the Rangers a couple nights ago. They kind of getting outplayed, right? But they found a way to hang in there, get it to overtime, and then, from there, anything can happen.
Yeah, and they did look a little different than a couple games prior that we saw. I mean, last week we talked about how the Kraken were on that chart from JFresh, right, that I showed on the podcast
Mhm.
about how they were being outchanced, but they were outscoring opponents, and kind of how do you square that circle? And I think we both agreed the way they were playing very well, and they were playing according to their system, and it just wasn't showing up numbers wise in the way that the shot quality and everything is calculated. These last two games were different. I
Yeah.
think in both of them, they really did not play well enough to win those games. They were being outchanced in a meaningful way, not just, in a kind of counting stats way, or where it's a lot of low quality shots. They were being seriously outchanced. And certainly they weren't generating many chances of their own in either of those two games, at least not to the last, 5 minutes or so in the Montreal game, and then just really never in the New York game. And so it does raise some more questions about, okay, is this sustainable, what they're doing, and how much is it that they're just playing really well according to their system? Because I think my confidence in that has been shaken a little bit over the last week, but they still managed to pick up points. So how do we explain that?
Well, that's the thing, and we've had a time of thinking of how do we explain that, right? And certainly when you look at the overall numbers, I think what we're starting to see is that as the sample size is getting larger, again, we're just now at 11 games, so we're starting to get to a point where if you were to look at stats, either conventional or from the analytics side of things, the more advanced stats, you're finally getting to a place where you can start having things make a little bit of sense, right? If it's too small a sample size, one game can just totally skew things. Your opponent can really skew things. I think we're starting to get to the point where we can start drawing conclusions from some of those numbers. And I think that's what's happened over the course of the last week, despite it only being two games. One of the things that I'm picking up on is where last week we were talking about it and we were saying like, oh, look, there's lots of different avenues in which this can be sustainable, right? Like that was kind of the main idea with the Kraken, which with the name of the podcast even last week, which was like we think it could be sustainable. I think what's happened is based on these last couple games and the way the team is playing, and now kind of looking at the numbers and being able to kind of trust them a little bit more, what we're seeing is some of those avenues have been closed off, right? I think that there are still directions and ways that this can go where the Kraken's success is sustainable and they do find a way to keep this up over the course of the full season and they stay in it until late and all of those things, but their options for doing that are becoming limited. It is being greatly narrowed, and they are being funneled down essentially the PDO tunnel. And we'll kind of see what what goes on there. But I mean, JFresh put out charts, right? They're the lowest expected goals team in the league as far as generating. Only team below two, right? They're generating less than two expected goals per game. Only team in the National Hockey League to be that low. You look at their, really most of the advanced stats, certainly anything that's going to be related to just pure shots, anything like Corsi does not favor this team because frankly they're getting massively outshot. There is a huge differential there between shots against and shots for with this team to the point where I believe no team has ever made the playoffs with a shot differential deficiency the way that this team has. And so I look at that stuff, RJ, and those are the avenues where I see things kind of being closed off for the Kraken continuing to be able to pick up points at a really good clip.
Right. And when you look at, because there's shots, which is just a more simple kind of stat, it doesn't take into account any kind of shot quality. Yeah, the Kraken have the fewest shots in the NHL. I think second fewest in shots per games played. And then as far as shot quality, like you mentioned with the expected goals, it's really showing up whichever metric you look at. And I think now watching the game, certainly the last two, I think that
Yeah.
tracks with what we're seeing. You've got, simple stats, you've got more complicated stats, and then you've got the eye test. And I think they're all saying the same thing. But what's interesting to me, though, is that, and this is where it feels like a contradiction here, because they're getting hardly any shots, hardly any shot quality. So you would expect, and yet they're scoring enough goals to be in these games. It's not like they're winning every game 2-1. I mean, they're playing 4 to 3 games fairly often, right? They're scoring usually 3 goals a game at least. you would expect the shooting percentage to be just ridiculously high,
Yeah.
or you would expect the goals scored over expected, right? Their finishing stats compared to shot quality to be extremely high. You'd expect that to be top 5 in the league, right? In shooting percentage or goals scored above expected, depending on what level of stats you want to use. And we're not seeing that. As far as shooting percentage, like 5-on-5, they're in the bottom half of the NHL. And overall, when you count power play and special teams, they're still like just about 10th in the league. And so you'd expect it to be higher. And so it's confusing to me.
It's really confusing, and that's where I think that this is the like I glimmer of sustainability hope I think is pushing it, and also just a ridiculous thing to say. That's dumb, but this is the avenue that for me seems the most sustainable for them, which is just kind of straight PDO. And look, we've talked about this in the past, expected goals, and the way that at least these kind of more publicly available models kind of calculate them. It's very heavily based off of two things: one, the quantity of shots, and then the location in which the shot took place on the ice. It does not necessarily factor in defensive movement, player movement, puck movement that led to that shot being taken. And so you do have to take those with a little bit of an asterisk. That being said, when you're kind of as far behind the rest of the NHL as the Kraken are in expected goals, I think like there is still something to be said for that. This is more something where you could start delineating the teams and say mushy middle or whatever, but rather than just, say that everything's fine. But I think that one of the things with this Kraken team is they are allowing a lot of shots, but they are very bad quality shots they're giving opponents. They're allowing great sight lines usually for their netminder. Joey Daccord is doing a really good job, and he's playing very well and making some very difficult saves, and getting lots of saves above expected and all of that kind of stuff. But that's kind of just normal for Joey. So like I'm not going to say that that's unsustainable because we've just kind of seen that. And look, he's only rocking a 904 save percentage. That's sustainable. That is not otherworldly or anything like that. So I look at the save percentage kind of side of things. I think that that's sustainable. And then on the other end of the ice with the Kraken, again, they're not generating a lot of expected goals. They're not generating shots. They're not generating chances, like kind of period. But when they do, they're not bad, right? Like they'll find a way to have it be off of a rebound, or they'll have it be a point shot with at least two guys in front of the other team's goaltender. I mean, you look at like Shesterkin this last game, and there was just a couple that he just wasn't going to have a shot at. So I think it's one of those things where it still feels like from a shooting percentage and a save percentage standpoint, it still feels like it could be sustainable, but it would require them to continue to play the way they're playing, continue to put the effort in that we're seeing them put in. Because I feel like if that lets up at all and you start allowing other teams to get to better areas in your own zone, that save percentage is going to start dropping pretty fast. If you don't get that pressure net front in the offensive zone, your shooting percentage is going to drop pretty fast. And once that happens, I think your main avenue to sustainable success with this team is completely closed off, because that's really what you're counting on at this point, because you're never going to out generate another team with this combination of roster and system.
Right. It requires all these things going right for you. And I mean, the Rangers game was just a perfect example of that because most of the time you play that game, you don't score 2 goals
Yeah.
out of the 13 shots that you get, and not a lot of quality there, too. You need that to go right. You need things defensively to go right. And I think this is where you got to tip your cap to the Kraken for the effort, at least, because the
Yep.
execution certainly wasn't there, but the effort was, because, and that because if the effort went away at any point, they get blown out in that game.
Yep.
Like it is ugly if the effort wanes for even 2 to 3 minutes of that 60 minutes.
Mhm.
You needed to give that full 60-minute effort, and they certainly did. But then I think you also need just some luck to go your way. And this is something that you brought up last week on the podcast as kind of a final reason. You said you can't really quantify it, but
Mhm.
every year there's like 1 or 2 teams that are just kind of the team of destiny that look bad in the advanced stats, and maybe don't even play the best, but just everything seems to go their way. And that can happen for a whole season. I mean, we saw it happen for the Kraken in year 2. They were one of those teams. I'm starting to buy in a little
Yeah.
bit here. I can't believe I'm saying this, but it just feels like the Kraken, in that sense, as long as they keep this up, they might just be that team of destiny this year. Because certainly after the last two games, I feel like so far, when the Kraken play well, they're rewarded for it.
Hmm.
When they don't play well, feels like they're still rewarded for it. And that's one of those hallmarks of the team of destiny every year, where even when they're not playing well, even when things aren't going well for them, they still somehow go well for them. I can't really explain it, but it feels like luck has very much been on the Kraken side, in addition to the work. I'm not saying it's all
Yeah.
undeserved. Like they're putting in the work, but I think they're also getting the luck, even more than they're generating for themselves.
Yeah, I think that that's fair. Even though, again, you're right, like the shooting percentage is not insanely high. Your 5-on-5 shooting percentage is below league average. Like you're actually pretty bad there. It's one of those things where it doesn't totally add up, and that's partly why we're having this conversation. I think a lot of fans are having this conversation. That being said, 13 shots is too few. I don't care if you're playing the best system game ever and you're grinding out the most like gutsy 1-0 victory in the history of the NHL, which there's a long way to go till we get there. 13 shots isn't enough. You need to find a way to shoot more. And I do think that, Lane Lambert basically agreed with that sentiment after the last game, right? He was asked from Glenn at Davy Jones' locker room to, would you say that your team needs kind of more of a shoot first mentality after something like this or something along those lines? And he was basically like, would it be fair to say that? And Lane Lambert was like, yeah, that would be fair to say. Like he was pretty much like, yeah, I think that is something we could use here a little bit. So we'll see kind of what happens tonight if there is a little bit more of that shoot first mentality and we start seeing things there. There's an element though where I want to say kind of almost like, well, it's not really broken. Like maybe don't try to fix it. Don't mess anything up here. 13 shots is too few. Like it is okay to go ahead and shoot some more pucks. You don't have to wait for the perfect opportunity or for the perfect screen or the perfect play, the perfect pass to the net front, those kinds of things. You don't always have to wait for that. You can go ahead and kind of fire it and then see what happens, right? And when you're playing with effort, when you are playing with multiple players wanting to go to the net front, it's okay to let a shot rip that the goaltender is going to save because you could still potentially pick up that rebound. And I think that that's the one kind of high effort style goal that we haven't seen a lot of from this team is those taking care of rebounds. We're seeing a lot of them getting the screens. We're seeing a lot of them getting passes to players who have managed to work their way open net front. What we're not seeing is them get rebounds, and I think that that's basically just a direct byproduct of the fact that they're not shooting the puck, and so there's never going to be a rebound if you don't take the shot in the first place.
Yeah, and Dylan, question for you on this too, as far as the willingness to shoot and trying to figure out maybe why that they might have that mental block. Because look, the Kraken should never, they'll never be, and they shouldn't ever be a volume shooting team
Yeah.
as they're currently constructed. That just is not something you want to do. But really, what it is just chances to shoot the puck where they have good opportunities that they're passing up on. I think that's something that Lane
Yeah.
Lambert highlighted there. Like you don't need to throw every shot on net, but maybe a few more. Do you think how much they're skating might have something to do with that, and
It's a good question.
what the system is asking them to do? Because look, you throw a shot on net and it can generate a rebound for you, as you just said.
Mhm.
But if that rebound goes to the other team and they start heading back up the ice, all of a sudden you need to get on your horse and get back, because that's what the system demands of you. And you probably have already skated quite a bit. If you're anywhere near later in the shift too, you
Yeah.
might be tired. And so that's why Lane Lambert, he does stress taking care of pucks.
Hmm.
Like you have to make sure you don't give up a puck unnecessarily. You can't fuel the other team's transition. The Kraken cannot afford to do that. And if you turn the slider too much toward taking care of pucks, it does result in almost never shooting the puck. And I think we might be seeing that. Like that kind of thing that's been
Yeah.
drilled into the players' heads to take care of the puck might be a little too much.
It might be. It might be. I'm with you. It makes sense, right? Like it tracks. I think you're onto something. And there's other aspects of it too, right? It's hard to go and battle net front. It's the most exhausting thing that you can do in the National Hockey League is go get into a one-on-one battle, whether it's along the boards, it's net front, it's in the corners, wherever. That's the most exhausting thing that you can do. And so if you've already defended for a little while on your shift, skated all the way up the ice, you're in the offensive zone, It takes a lot to go and do that, right? And it's going to take a lot to go and try to grind out some net front rebound and go in that direction. It's a lot easier just to kind of cycle it up, cycle it back up to the point, let them kind of hold on to it. The other team's going to be a little bit passive. You could catch your breath, whatever. The problem is with the point shots. I mean, those are the shots that have the potential to feed the other team's transition, right? Like you take that shot from the point, it gets blocked. Really easy for the other team's forwards to just start heading up the ice on you. And I think that that's why we see some reluctance from the defensemen to take shots from up high. I think that's partly why we also don't see any forwards take shots from distance. Like, when was the last time we saw a forward take a shot from, 30 feet out? It just doesn't happen. Like,
Yeah, I'm
I'm
struggling to
actually,
remember a
I,
specific time.
I'm actually, yeah, I'm like, I don't know that it's happened at all.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where I do think there might be an element of that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's just something I thought of now. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. That if you're tired, you might want to not shoot the puck and then have to skate all the way back really fast. The couple times I can think of shots from the Rangers game where forwards took them from far out was usually it was Eli Tolvanen, but shooting from a distance, like kind of right into Shesterkin's glove to get a whistle and get an offensive zone
Yeah.
face off.
Yeah. Which, I mean, there's some
Not a
legitimacy to
bad
that
play,
at times. And especially if you're coming off a long shift, go ahead and go for something like that.
but you're not aiming for the rebound or trying to
Right.
create chances. It's a shot designed to kind of just get position on the ice for the next play.
Exactly. And then hope you win a face off, which is kind of a big ask with this team.
That
The
was
way they
another
play.
area Lane Lambert talked about as far as needing to be better. I think there were 30 something percent on the
Yeah.
draws in the last game.
Yeah. As for other things, I still think there's one other avenue that's potentially open to them, but that they're not using at the moment, RJ, that could help make this sustainable. And that is special teams. And I mean, I've been bringing this up all year long, how important special teams are going to be. You're going to find yourself in so many of these one goal games. You need to win that special teams battle. And power play, to their credit, operating at what, 21.88%. I think you said that was good enough for top 10 in the league right now. So that is, they're getting things done there. Would like to see more opportunities on the power play. It feels like we haven't gotten a lot of those in the last little bit. But the big thing is going to be fixing the penalty kill. Right now, your PK is sitting at 67.86%. That is well below league average. That is something that needs to get fixed, because if you want to start converting some of these OTLs into wins, that's one way you can do it, is you can cut down on, a goal a game or whatever, which you're close to averaging, giving up special teams wise. You've allowed 9 power play goals to your opponents in 11 games. That is close to a goal a game that you're giving up there. That if you take those off the board, this team's going to be in a much, much better spot. You're talking about games where the effort isn't really there, potentially getting to overtime, and you're talking about the games where the effort is there, just being wins in regulation. And I think that that's something that if they're able to kind of correct and right that ship, I think it'll go a long, long way to helping make this more sustainable than it might otherwise be.
Exactly. And I think there's plenty of room for improvement there. Like the power play is going at a good enough clip. Like that's fine. If you
Yep.
continue that, that's okay. But when you look at like say combined power play and PK percentage, which league wide, it's exactly 100% basically, because
Yeah.
for power play, it's either a goal or not a goal. And so you'd expect that to be kind of the medium mark that you'd at least be going for. Better than that is great. Worse than that, less than average. And the Kraken are not hitting that 100% mark combined power play and PK. It's what, like 89% or something too. It's pretty low, below
Yeah.
100, and it's all on the PK. Like
Hmm.
the PK just needs to be improved. I mean, because I always try and avoid, I know we do on this podcast, always trying to avoid just saying, well, here's a problem, they need to fix it, without saying what they
Well,
could do or,
yeah.
or why. So we don't need to spend a ton of time on this, but like real quick, like what are you seeing from the PK and what can they improve? Because one thing I noticed in the Rangers game was, man, they were playing condensed. The Rangers had
Yeah.
a ton of space to work the puck up high and generate one timers from the side, or just lots of different chances, whatever they were looking for.
Yeah. I mean, they're just spending way too much time in their own zone. Like that's I think the big thing is they do not do a good job of pressuring the other team, forcing the other team into bad shots that then you can potentially get the rebound from and clear the zone. Like we see this a lot with the Kraken, right? You lose the face off or whatever. you take a shot, you don't get the rebound, and then it gets sent up the ice. Kraken on the power play are having to do 3, 4, 5 zone entries over the course of their power play. The Rangers average maybe one per shift, right? Like they were just spending the entire 2 minutes essentially in the Kraken zone. It's kind of just as simple as that, right? Just get out there. I think what happens is they're already starting off fairly conservative on the power play, but then the longer you're out there for that shift, the more and more and more that you're going to, get more and more conservative because you're conserving energy. You're getting tired. You're tightening that box around your goaltender because you just don't have it anymore. You don't have the energy and the ability to go out there and really try to force a play. And so I think that that's really just been their biggest problem, is that they're not getting clears. It's forcing them to be on long shifts, which just compounds the problem and it becomes this vicious cycle. That's, I think, the number one thing I would change. The other thing I would probably change and look at is some personnel. I think that you have a couple guys on this team that have struggled defensively at both the defenseman position and at forward. And I look at those guys that have struggled and, whether it's analytics wise or eye test wise at 5-on-5, and then I look and they're kind of key members of your PK. Why is that, right? And I don't, I hate calling people out specifically, but like we talked about it earlier, right? Chandler Stevenson is like the one exception to this kind of 200-foot rule that the centers have in the system, and that's spoken to by like the skating distance thing that we pointed to earlier. And again, just watch the game, it's clear. Why is he then getting so much PK time? Right? Like if you're not trusting him to be like the
I
main.
know the one reason for that, but
Well, yes, I know, but
he's
it's
your best face-off man.
yes, and that is true. But like if it's, first or third period, you could have him take the face off and then kind of work over for a quick change. Like that happens, or like
Yeah.
the moment you get the clear, have him change. That's not
And if you
happening.
win the face-off, you should be able to get that clear.
Exactly. And so, there's stuff like that. Like you're kind of not trusting him at 5-on-5 to be a defender, but then you're trusting him at on the PK to be a defender. Like it doesn't line up, right? And so I think that that's, and and that's just kind of what it is. And so I think there's stuff like that. I think like Ryan Lindgren, is getting a lot of PK time, and I think he's struggled this year just kind of in general. And I think that those are like two examples of maybe some shifts in personnel that might help out the PK a little as well.
Yeah, and on the Stevenson, I think it's as simple as the face-offs. And I do wonder what the analytics say, because I'm sure there are some like, TMO numbers or whatever that say about, okay, how much of a positive is it to win that face-off or have a better chance at winning that face-off, even if you have a slightly a worse defender on the ice if you don't win it.
It is
It's interesting.
probably worth it. Like, because if you can start a
If you
PK
can win
off
it,
with a
yeah.
kill, that's pretty huge. But
We were just saying how important that is to
yeah,
get those clears and make them get the entries.
yeah. No, but like again, win the face off, get the clear, get the change, right? Or even if you
Mhm.
don't get the clear, you can still find ways of getting the change or having him play over there. But it's one of those things where, also, and this goes broader, I'm not talking about Chandler Stevenson now. When you get the clear, defend kind of aggressively. It's pretty easy to gain the zone against this PK, right? Like you
Mhm.
look at some other teams and the way the Kraken have to really work on the power play just to gain the zone. That's not happening right now for other teams. They can just kind of walk into the zone and all of a sudden they're set up and then they're working because the Kraken are playing so well. Here, I won't use the word conservative. I will use the word passive because I think they are pretty passive at defending the blue line after they get it clear. And maybe some of that is because they're just getting a line change. But you know what? You should then have some fresh legs on the ice by the time they're getting back to your blue line, and you should be able to try to, force them to maybe have to do a regroup or two before they can just enter the zone. And that's just not happening right now. So I just think kind of all the way around, no matter how you slice it, whether it's, how conservative they are, how passive they are with the zone entries, maybe some of the personnel decisions, I think just kind of all those areas kind of need to be reset essentially, and they need to take like a look at it and see that it's not really working, because I think we're enough time in that every other kind of aspect of the Kraken is kind of clicking and it's working and they're contributing to the team being in the spots that they're being in, but the PK just isn't. And I'm not seeing anything from the eye test or based on the numbers that's telling me it's going to get better just as they get more reps.
Right. In every other area, we've seen kind of what the finished product should look like and
Yeah.
exactly what they're going for. It hasn't been all the time, but it's been a lot of the time, and we've
Yep.
seen it. On the PK, I don't think there's really been any time that we've
Yeah.
seen it this season.
Yeah, good way of putting it. So, I think that's still their other avenue that could lead to, or to help make it more sustainable and successful. They haven't utilized it yet. They're just utilizing the PDO street, but we've seen PDO leaning on PDO work well for a lot of teams. So it is still a viable strategy, but it's concerning that the Kraken are kind of down to just that. There isn't really like other ways for this to potentially turn into sustainable success for the team beyond them essentially just out efforting their opponents each and every night.
Yeah. I'd say they have one more thing in
Oh,
their favor. And that's the schedule this November
well,
coming up.
yes.
Like we talked about the schedule. It's kind of soft starting, against Chicago tonight. Like they have a lot of games against teams that they really should beat and where the talent imbalance won't be as much. So like this is the time to bank points. And so you do have that in your favor as well.
Yeah, no, that's very
And all the
true.
more reason to look forward to the 4 games that we got this week before the next deep dive.
I was gonna say the 4 games this week, the post game live tonight after the game against the Blackhawks, where we'll see if they work on some of this stuff. And then obviously later on this month with the watch party at Queen Anne Beer Hall on the 23rd.
Yep, against the New York Islanders. So we've had good luck against the New York Islanders. I know we did a watch party against them for a big shootout win in the
Yeah,
past. So it's gonna be real fun.
yeah, Lane Lambert revenge game too.
That's right. Oh, that'll
Yeah.
be really fun.
And things are very up and down over in Islanders land as well. You got the positives like Matt Schaefer looking fantastic, first overall pick, and then you got like Barzal being healthy scratched. So cool.
Don't miss the team bus.
Yep, definitely, definitely. All right, I think that's gonna do it for this week's deep dive. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. Huge shout out to the offices of Rico Tessendor for sponsoring the podcast, as it does each and every week. And while we hope none of you ever need his services, the odds say that at some point someone out there will be involved in an accident, whether on the road, at work, or anywhere in between. And when you are, we hope you call Rico at 425-778-9800 or visit his website, ricotessendor.com, to schedule a free consultation. He's won millions of dollars for his clients and helped thousands of people in the greater Seattle area. And as a fellow member of the ECH community, we know he'll help you too. Looking forward to all these games this week. Hope to see you all around CPA and at the watch party later on this month. But until then, see you next time.
Hey everyone, before we go, we just wanted to give a quick shout out to all of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/Emerald City Hockey, especially our Terror of the Deep patrons.
Thank you so much for making all this possible. We really appreciate your support.